Hello YouTube, Dave here again. Today I'm going to be flipping through and giving you my thoughts on Secrets of Magic. This is the latest book for the Pathfinder 2nd edition RPG. And this book was sent to me by Paizo Publishing for the purposes of doing this review. So I just want to state that, to be perfectly clear and transparent. However, they are not influencing the video, they're not sponsoring the video, they're not pre-screening it to make sure it meets with their approval. They'll see the video at the same time as everybody else, and the opinions that I express in this are 100% completely and totally my own. But I do want to thank them for sending this to me because this was a book that I was very much interested in when I saw that it was announced. The first thing that kind of strikes me is just the visual presentation of the book. It actually kind of reminds me almost of like the first edition Pathfinder books, the way that they were done, because like to date, all of the Pathfinder 2nd edition books have had like a very specific cover design. So where the Pathfinder logo is, it would be either like a maroon color or blue, depending on if it was considered to be like a rule supplement or part of the Lost Omen series. And then you'd have sort of like this tan color going down the rest of the spine with the name of the book. But this actually kind of feels like a first edition style book, and I like it. I actually like the colorful spine. I hope they do more of that, actually. The book retails for $49.99 US. The Canadian prices will vary. I've seen them from $59.99 to around like $62, $63.99. That again will vary depending on the store, the exchange rate that they use, and there's all kinds of things that will affect the Canadian price, but the US price is $49.99. So we're gonna flip through this kind of quickly and just sort of touch on some of the aspects here. So you can obviously just watch the flip through if you want to see sort of what's in here, get an idea of it. And I'll try to point out the things that I personally really liked as I was sort of going through here. The first chapter here, Essentials of Magic, this is a really cool section because it sort of goes over like the different traditions of magic and the different schools of magic, as well as like new backgrounds and even some rare backgrounds which have some really cool features attached to them. But the thing I love about this section is that for the different schools of magic, or the different, sorry, not schools of magic, but for the different magical traditions, arcane, divine, primal, and occult, they actually, like, their sort of write-ups are designed to look like they're either excerpts from historical texts or like a textbook that mages or priests or whatever would study from, or they look like they might be like a letter written to someone explaining certain things. It's just really, really cool the way that they designed it here. So yeah, this look like, again, they look like excerpts from actual text, which is super cool. This one here again looks more like a letter. Then you got what looks sort of almost like a journal entry. Again, just really, really, I love the design behind that. I think it looks so cool. And it's just something that I wasn't expecting to see in this book, but man, it's just visually, it's very appealing to look at. And then we get the different the arches of incantation. So these are the schools of magic. And it gives you some really cool information. I just want to sort of focus on my personal favorite here. So you've got like the different signs. You got like the harmonic colors. So colors sort of associated with the that particular school of magic. Celestial body, so they could be planets, the sun, the moon, a season, a plant, animals, stones, and hero cards. But they also sort of go over a little bit of, again, kind of like textbook style information on the different schools of magic. They can sort of go over like what how the school of magic may have been formed or sort of where it was derived from. What's really cool about evocation, though, is it's sort of theorized that it was the first form of magic ever learned by like the mortal or humanoid races, and that each of the different schools of magic was spun off from evocation as different like arcane theories and studies and stuff were conducted to sort of shape magic based off of the other schools of magic. It's just, again, really, really cool. It's just a really fun read. And I'm a sucker for really good flavor text, and this early section delivers that in spades. It was just really, really well done. Backgrounds, it's always great to have those, but the rare magical backgrounds are really cool because in addition to like what normal backgrounds will give you, which is like an attribute bonus, a skill training, and a specific feat. These give you like other abilities that you can sort of add on to that. So like the Genie Blessed, for example, they gain an ability where they can, as a free action, once per day, they can wish for luck. And essentially what it allows them to do if they're making an attack roll, saving throw, or skill check, they can roll 2d20 and take the better of the two results. So that's really cool. You have like Seer of the Dead. So this one here says, you've been gifted with the ability to see and speak with the departed. This could have manifested at birth or when a chance encounter linked you inextricably, there we go, that's how you pronounce it, to the spirits of the dead. Their constant presence might feel like a curse, or it might provide with welcome companionship. So like, it's just, again, really cool stuff. And I love these rare magical backgrounds. Now, they are rare, so the idea is that you're not going to use them too much. Like, you don't necessarily want everyone to have it or have like the same one, but they're awesome. I love it, and I want to see more of those in the future. All the like the rare stuff that's been introduced so far has been really cool throughout different books. Up next, we have our classes. So there are 2 new classes introduced in this book. We have the Magus, and they essentially combine like martial fighting with like weapons and armor with spellcasting ability. So they sort of like their focus is split between spellcasting and actual fighting ability. Like they're trained in light, medium armor, simple martial weapons. And we'll look at their spellcasting progression here in a moment, because the spellcasting the classes in this book have a very unique type of spell progression compared to what we've seen in like the core rulebook, for example. But what's really cool about this particular class is that they have Spell Strike. So Spell Strike allows them to sort of channel magical effects and deliver them with the, so they sort of channel the spell into their like weapon that they attack with. And they can actually strike with the weapon, dealing the weapon damage and the spell effect at the same time. And then it gives you some sort of rules as how you have to do it. So for example, if it's an area effect spell that you trigger when you make the attack roll, whoever you attack with the weapon attack has to be included in the spell's area. But it's just a really cool feature. And then you get the Arcane Cascade. So with the Arcane Cascade, it just says like your requirement to use it is that you use your most recent action to cast a spell or make a spell strike. And essentially what happens is when you're casting the spell, there's sort of like leftover residual magical energy that just would normally just sort of dissipate after the spell is cast. However, you can actually collect that energy and use it to deal extra damage with your weapon. So it starts off with just 1 extra point of damage, but it increases to 2 if you have specialization in the weapon, and if you have greater specialization, it goes up to 3. The school of magic that you cast will also dictate the type of extra damage that the Arcane Cascade deals. So Abjuration or Evocation deals force damage. Conjuration or Transmutation is the same type as your weapon, so bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. Divination, Enchantment, or Illusion is sort of like a mental energy. And Necromancy, if you're using Necromancy, then that extra damage is considered to be negative energy. They also get Hybrid Studies. They're sort of like a specialization that is what they sort of like focus on. So you have like Inexorable Iron, which gives you, when you enter the Arcane Cascade stance, at the start of each of your turns while you're in the stance, if you're wielding a melee weapon in 2 hands, you gain 1 extra hit point. So they just sort of give you like extra class features. It's kind of like, specializing in like a school of magic or, Druid Circle. It's just sort of like their version of that. But then we get into their spell casting, and this is where the classes in this book get kind of interesting, because their focus is actually technically mainly on something else. Like, they're not dedicated spellcasters. So they don't get a full spell progression the way that a cleric, druid, bard, like any of those classes do. Instead, what they get is they get whatever their highest level spell is that they can cast, and they can cast the level of spell below that. And they get like up to 2 spell slots for each of those levels. And when they gain a new higher level spell slot, they drop like their lowest one. So for example, they start off with first level spells. obviously. Then they gain second level spells. But when they gain third level spells, the same level that they gain access to third level spells, they lose access to the first level spell slots. The idea essentially with here is that they're focusing, like, so they're not focusing on spell casting per se. They're more focused on sort of like the martial aspect of things and trying to use magic to augment that. They do gain additional spell slots that we see here with an asterisk, second, eventually third, and then finally fourth level. They get like 2 extra spell slots that they can use for specific spells. But they just, like I said, they just get this sort of like a new style of spell progression where they just have like 2 levels of spell slots available to them at any given time. And the lower level stuff, they stop being able to cast those spells specifically. Now, the Magus does use a spell book, so they still have access to the spells. So essentially what they can do is they can just use whatever like lower level spells that they no longer can cast, and they can just heighten them using their higher level spell slots. And then, like I said, they get these bonus spell slots under the studious spells. And they are spell slots that are separate from their normal progression, and they can only be done or used with certain spells. It's the same thing as a cleric's divine font, right? Where a cleric gains a certain number of bonus spells at the highest level of spell that they can cast, but it has to be used specifically for only heal or harm as dictated by their deity. So this is sort of the same thing, but when you gain the second level spell slots, you can use them for spider climb, true strike, or water breathing. When they get access to the third level spells, they lose the second level spell slots, and they instead gain 2 third level spell slots that they can use for those previously mentioned spells, as well as haste. And then when they gain their 4th level spell slot, bonus spell slots, they drop the 3rd level, and they can cast all those previous spells as well as fly. And then their different, hybrid studies will also give them a few extra spells that they can use with that as well. So their study sort of affects what those bonus spell slots can be used for. And I think just overall, it's a really cool way of doing things. And I kind of like it. It feels very, very unique. Right, and then we get our summoner. So the summoner summons. So they may have a bond with a creature called an Eidolon. And the Eidolon, like when they start the class, they manifest like their Eidolon. And I believe they're locked into they choose a specific type. And there's a list of them later on that you get, but there's like demon, dragon, all kinds of cool stuff. We'll have a look at them in a moment. But you can summon that, and you can sort of share actions, like a pool of actions together. You can share your senses, and they get the same kind of spell casting progression, where they only get their highest level of spell available to them and the level directly beneath that. And then, like, when they start gaining higher and higher level spells, their lower level spell slots start dropping off. Again, they could do the same thing with their lower level spells, although these are like spontaneous casters, so you can just swap out your lowest level spell slots that you no longer have, or spells that you know, and either like use a heightened version at a higher level or just choose something new. So they're more like the sorcerer type. But the reason again behind this type of progression for the summoner is it's not that they necessarily know magic on their own, it's just they can draw magical energies from the Eidolon creature that they summon, or that they have this sort of like spiritual link to, and that's where they get the spell slots from. So here are the different Eidolons that you can get. We've got the Angel Eidolon, and each one, it gives you sort of like the tradition that you draw spells from, so what spell list you're looking at, the traits of the creature, what the alignment has to be, its home plane. You get some different attacks that you can get. You also get usually a couple of different choices between like the type of specific Eidolon. So with the Angel one, you have the Avenger or the Emissary, and that just sort of dictates what their attributes are to begin with, and the abilities that they gain sort of as you go up in level. So you have the we have the Angel Eidolon, you've got the Anger Phantom Eidolon, which is that guy there. You've got the Beast Eidolon, the Construct Eidolon, The Demon Eidolon, I think that looks really, really cool. There's the Devotion Phantom. You also have the Draconic, or the Dragon Eidolon, Fae, Plant, and then the Psychopomp, which is kind of like the Lovecraftian type of creatures, essentially. And then you get like their different feats and stuff. So again, just really, really cool stuff here. Along with that, you also get the multi-class archetypes. So if you wanted to multi-class into, if you're an existing class or a different class already and you want to like multi-class into one of the ones from this book, these are the feats that you take, and you gain sort of limited stripped down versions of their class features with each feat that you take. Really cool stuff. And then we're into our spells. I'm just going to flip through this really, really quickly. But if you want to take a moment to pause and look at the spell names and descriptions, you can certainly do that. There's just too many spells to go through, all of them. So I'll just sort of flip through this section kind of quickly, but there's all kinds of really cool spells in here. You've got spells that sort of transform you into different shapes, like an aberrant form or an angel form, which gives you, an armor class boost, different attacks and stuff that you could do. Again, really, really cool stuff. My favorite spell so far of the ones that I've read, there's all kinds of great ones. Like I love the title of Canticle of Everlasting Grief, but I really love the Clone Companion. So it's basically a spell where the target has to be, your companion. It's sustained up to a minute, but essentially you create a duplicate of that individual, and that duplicate essentially like mirrors the actions of the person that you cast a spell off of. It's just like, again, a really kind of neat idea. I like it. You can grant them actions that they take, but they have to do the exact same things that the target they were cloned off of does. It's just, I don't know. I think it's really cool. There's also a spell in here I think it's called Shift Blame. And that one's really cool as well. It's mainly like role-playing, role-playing that you can sort of use it with, although like you can sort of have it like an attack. If an attack roll is done, you can sort of shift the focus off of yourself and put it on someone else, or you could take the focus off of someone and put it on yourself. It doesn't necessarily force the individual that the spell was cast on to act in any particular way, but it just like alters their memory. So like if an Intimidate was done and you screwed up on it, you could like cast the spell and shift the blame onto somebody else so that they don't think that you were the one that was trying to intimidate them. I think it's just a really cool, like definitely very situational spell, but I think it would be a really cool one to use as well. I think we're actually coming up on it here. Shift Blame, yeah, there it is. And some summon spells, including a 10th level spell, Summon Kaiju, so you can summon these big giant monsters to fight for you. I mean, that's just a great spell to have as well. There's some really, really cool stuff in this book overall. Winning Streak. Focus spells for the Magus and for the Summoner, so those are both included in here. And then we've got Rituals. So Rituals are really cool because Rituals are something that can be done by just about anyone. They're not like spellcaster specific, but what they are is they're a type of spell casting that takes a lot longer. We have like a casting time of an hour, casting time of a day, so they take a lot longer to do than a typical spell. But the trade-off is that you don't have to be a spellcaster to do them. There's all kinds of cool ones here as well. Like Mind Swap is really neat. The Osmodian Wager, where you can sort of like gamble essentially with someone. Not with someone, but with like a creature from the lower planes, place bets with them, stuff like that. But my favorite one has to be Bathe in Blood, because this is a ritual where essentially like you bathe, and I think it's like 30, is it 30 gallons or 30 liters? I'm Canadian, so I always want to say liters, but I think it might be, okay, yeah, it's 30 gallons of blood that you have to immerse yourself in, and the blood, I think it has to come from the bloodline of the individual, or they have to be like related to one another in some form or fashion. But when you cast this ritual and bathe in the blood, you roll it's a skill check. I forget the exact I forget the exact skill check off the top of my head, but I think it is occultism. Yeah, so it's an occultism check, and your degree of success or failure can be good or bad. So if you succeed, you become 20 years younger, and you are you're basically immune to aging for 20 years. So like you roll back 20 years in terms of your physical appearance, and it will take 20 years before you start aging from the point that you roll back to. So it's kind of a way of like immortality. A critical success is like 40 years. So you regress in age by 40 years, and you don't age again for 40 years. If you fail, there's no effect. However, if you critically fail on your check, then you just straight up die, and typically come back as like an undead creature. So that's really cool. But the reason I love this is because I'm sort of a history buff, and this is very much the Elizabeth Bathory, type of ritual, where she would bathe in blood because she thought it granted her like eternal youth and beauty. And there's a ritual now that you can do for that. So this is something that I absolutely would end up using in a campaign, as like something that an NPC would work towards. So I would like maybe try to have something where individuals start going missing, and at first it seems random, but as it turns out, like they all sort of share like a common ancestor, so technically their bloodlines are all related, and that can lead them to the person that's been capturing them, draining them of their blood, and using it for this ritual to grant them like, eternal youth, right, sort of thing. I just think that that's really cool. And then we got like new magic items, so again, always cool stuff to have in here. Again, I'm not going to focus on anything in particular here. If you want to sort of have an idea of what's in the book, it just in general, whenever you're adding like new items that the players aren't going to be instantly familiar with, it's always great, and stuff that I would sort of slowly start introducing into my campaign. You got magical tattoos, so if you're into that, you can certainly do that. Personal staffs are really cool. Because you basically you craft the staff, and depending on your level or the level of the staff that you craft, it can actually contain spells and spell slots that you can use. It's just great. I love that idea. I don't think crafting really gets done enough anymore in modern RPGs, so I'd love to see more stuff along those lines. And again, just some more consumables, permanent items, like weapon runes, armor runes, other stuff. Deck of Illusions is cool. The Deck of Mischief, I kind of like that one as well. Restful Tent, that's a pretty neat one. And then Chapter 5. So Chapter 5 is pound for pound my favorite part of this entire book. Now, this is a section, again, where you probably want to sort of pick and choose what you're going to use, because this gives you like new types of spell casting, like archetypes that you can use for like the archetype feats. There's some access to new things for like the Elementalist, I think, has like new features for druids and monks, as well as just being an Elementalist spellcaster. So there's just all kinds of like just cool stuff that they've introduced here. There's geomancy, ley lines, if that's something that you're interested in. I'm not particularly fond of ley lines myself, but I've played RPGs where that was like central, or to the magic system. So it's cool that they've introduced that in here. There's magic, shadow magic, soul seeds, where you sort of like take creatures' souls and affix them to items to turn them into like magical relics. There's Soulforged armaments, where you do it specifically like weapons and armor. It's really cool. You've got the rune magic, so if you wanted to get into like the Rise of the Rune Lord kind of stuff, that's in here. True Name magic, again, not my cup of tea, but it is kind of cool that it's in there. And then you've got Wellspring magic. It's both a blessing and a curse. It grants a deep infusion of magic, potentially allowing the casting of many spells, but also risks out of control. So it's kind of like a wild magic type of thing, if you want to introduce that into your game. So there are two things in here that I really absolutely love. The first one is cathartic magic. So it's basically like you have the dedication. Essentially what it is you harness the power of emotions, and like you can just sort of do different things with them. They can grant you different types of bonuses. It's just I think it's just sort of a neat concept. Again, I would use it absolutely for NPCs. Like I could see like an order of like mages or clerics that, for example, you could have an order of, priests that, believe that, it's their lot in life to suffer. So they might, draw from the misery, emotional state kind of thing. But just to give you sort of an idea, if you have like the fear one and that's sort of your focus, you can have what's called a catharsis trigger, and that can give you things like emotional fervor. And I think the fallout is when your emotional fervor sort of wears off. But essentially with the fear one, the trigger for it is if you become frightened. And when you become frightened, you actually increase the frightened value by 1 to a maximum of 4. So if you were frightened 1 when this triggers, you become frightened 2 instead. Now that sounds bad, but the actual emotional fervor, so once you've triggered your catharsis, what it does is it takes the status penalty, so whatever the number is attached to that frightened value, and instead of it being a penalty from your spell DCs or spell attack bonuses, you actually gain that number as a bonus to like the rolls and everything. So for example, if you were frightened 3, or if you were frightened 2, you trigger the catharsis, you increase to frightened 3. Instead of getting like a -3 to your spellcasting roll, attack roll, you get a +3 bonus. So it's kind of cool. And then once that ends, you end up fleeing for a couple of rounds. But it's just again a really cool concept that they've done here. Then we got our elementalism with the druid circles and monk stances, elemental spell lists, as well as the elementalist dedication or archetype that you can use. But this is my other favorite part of this book, is the flexible preparation option. So this is something that you have to be like a wizard, cleric, or like druid. I think, was it witches as well? Basically, if you are a class that has to prepare your spell slots individually, which is the way that Pathfinder 2nd Edition does it, you can choose this as an alternative. Now the trade-off is that you gain fewer spells per each level. So I think instead of like getting up to, I think it's 3. I think 3 spells per level is sort of the cap that they have. So instead of getting up to 3, you only get up to 2. And it looks like you also lose like the 10th level spell slots at like your highest levels. But instead of having to prepare each spell slot individually, the way that they normally do, you can just select a number of spells equal to the total number of spell slots that you have available, right? So at first level and second level, you only have 2 spell slots that you can use, so you can prepare 2 different spells. And you can either cast each spell once, one spell twice, right? Either or of them twice. Instead of having to say specifically that this first level spell slot is for Magic Missile, the second level spell slot is for like, I think Featherfall is the one they use here. So we'll just go with Featherfall, right? So instead of having to specifically choose which slot is dictated to which spell, you just get the ability to prepare a number of different spells per day, and then you can just use them however you want with the spell slots that you have available to you. If a spell can be heightened, then you can just automatically heighten it using the appropriate level of spell slots. So with Magic Missile, again, you could heighten it from a first level spell slot to a third level spell slot, because I think it's I think it's 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th. So you can do that instead of having to prepare specifically for that level. So you get the flexibility to cast spells however you want with the slots that you have available. The trade-off is that you have fewer spells overall, but you're not in a situation where you risk losing out on casting a spell altogether because the spell that you had prepared into that spell slot just never ended up being useful. So I think that's kind of cool overall. I like that option. So you can take it, you have to take it at first level. And if you take it, you automatically are forced to take the flexible spellcaster dedication feat at second level, but it gives you like some extra cantrips that you can use, so it's worth taking anyway. So yeah, that's just, I really like that. And if you have a class that grants you like bonus spells of a particular level, like a cleric's divine font, which is at their highest level that they can cast, you still gain that, and you're still limited to the spells specified under that class. So like, heal or harm for the divine font. But it's just, again, it's just really cool. It's an option that's there. You can use it or not. But I love the fact that there is a trade-off, to adding the flexibility. But I love that like both of those options exist now. So I thought like that's honestly this is my single favorite part of the entire book is this section here. But then we got, like I said, a few other types of magic that you can use, and depending on what your interests are, you may like them, you may end up using them, you may not. Some of them are listed under rare, so you don't want to use them too frequently or heavily. It just comes down to sort of a matter of taste for everything after that. But yeah, so again, just some really, really cool stuff overall in this book and in this chapter in particular. Great things you can use to sort of flavor your campaign and to sort of introduce some new and interesting concepts into your campaign. So again, you probably don't want to introduce all of this stuff all at once, but slowly putting it into a campaign, like having a soul forged item, I think would be really cool as a treasure item that you find. And then if you study it, you might learn how they're created and potentially be able to do that again afterwards. I just, again, some really cool stuff in here. A beautifully designed and laid out book. Lots of cool, useful stuff in here. 2 new classes that are very interesting, by the looks of them, and I think are going to be great additions to the Pathfinder 2nd Edition game overall. So that was the flip through. I've already sort of spoiled my review portion of it, but this is a great book. I think this is an absolutely fantastic book, and it's one that I do highly recommend you pick up if you are playing or if you are running Pathfinder 2nd Edition. Though the one thing I will say for sure is you may want to sort of slowly integrate concepts from this book into your campaign instead of just opening the floodgates all at once, because it does feel a little overwhelming if you're looking at all the different like types of magical, like geomancy, wellspring magic, shadow magic, true name, ley lines. Like it's a lot of stuff to sort of introduce all at once, but it's a great book for just slowly introducing things. Like, so my plan for spells would be if I was running something and a spell scroll came up, instead of it just being like a boring spell scroll of like fireball, haste, lightning bolt, invisibility, or any of that stuff, what I would actually do is pick a spell at the same level from this book, and it's something new, it's something different, it's something that feels unique, and let the player be able to learn how to actually cast that spell and either put it in their spell book or add it to their spell repertoire. They could gain them from like the high priest of their order, or it could be some sort of like a divine boon from their god if it's like the cleric. Druids could gain from an archdruid or like a powerful fey creature. If you have the occult spellcasting tradition, you could find this in like a book of forbidden lore, or from something like a brain cylinder, that like a Miko brain cylinder. You could find someone that has like this strange unique lore and introduce like spells that way. So it's one of those things that I sort of recommend like slowly sort of dealing out into your campaign. But I think this is a book that, there's going to be something in here that's going to be really good, like really interesting, I think, for just about any group. So you like, no matter what kind of style of game that you kind of want to go for, I think there's going to be something in here for you. And again, I can't recommend it enough. It's a fantastic book. I can't wait to see more books along this line, because I think this set a pretty high bar for like introducing like rare options, but just having some really cool stuff in there. The classes, I think both of the classes are very unique feeling and interesting. Their spellcasting progression seemed a little unusual to me at first, but they do explain it well, and honestly it kind of makes sense, because as you go up in power, there tends to be situations where you're like your lowest level spell slots, you just don't find yourself using a whole lot. It's not guaranteed, right? I'm not trying to project onto every single group out there. It's just something that I have seen in the past. So like, I kind of like the idea that they, focus mainly on just their most powerful abilities, which they use to tie into their other class features, like their weapon attacks for the magus, or with their Eidolon, the summoned creature that they did. So I really love both of those classes, and I like the fact that the spell casting for them is just different. right? It just feels different and new and interesting. So I really like it. So overall, yeah, this is a great book, and yeah, I think you're going to, whatever you're into, there's going to be something in here for you. There's just a lot of great stuff. Flexible spell casting, the rituals, like for me, I was just really enamored with a lot of that stuff. So this is a fantastic book, and I cannot thank Paizo enough for sending this to me, because this thing is just a work of art. It's just a beautiful book. And honestly, of all the Pathfinder supplements that have come out so far, and there's been some really good Pathfinder supplements, this might be my favorite one overall, just from the layout and the art style, having things like bits of lore introduced in a manner that looks like they're taken from like a textbook or historical documents or letters. I think that was just really well done, and the quality of the rest of the content is up to the same Paizo standards. So just excellent stuff overall. You're not going to be disappointed. So I recommend, if you're interested in this, definitely, contact your local game store and talk to them about getting this in if they don't already have it, because this is a fantastic book. So thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know in the comments below if you've picked up Secrets of Magic, and if you have, what's your favorite new feature, spellcasting, alternate spellcasting system, the classes. Like, let me know what your favorite part of the book was, and how you've been able to integrate into your campaigns, if you've been able to do so yet, or how you plan on introducing the information contained in this book. I always love to hear your guys' idea, because you guys come up with some really amazing stuff. So thanks again for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all next time. Take care.